Masechet Yoma Daf Mem Bet 42. We have an interesting question, which is, can a non-Kohen do shechita for the following two cases: the para, the pad of the Kohen Gadol, and the para aduma that also needs shechita. So that's the question. We have a machloket. We're starting here. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. I heard a tradition about these two slaughters. Achat shel para, v'achat shel paro. One regarding para is para aduma, and one is the pad of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Achat kishena bezad, v'achat pesulat bezad, v'layadana heminayu. I heard that one of them a non-Kohen can do, and one of them a non-Kohen cannot do. I just don't remember the tradition. Who said which one? Which one is which? Okay, this is very interesting. In general, most sacrifices, a non-Kohen is allowed to do the shechita. It's not considered an avodah that the Kohen has to do. So we saw that, and we proved it from Pisukim and all that. Now the question is, what about these two? They're kind of exceptional. The para aduma is not really a sacrifice. It gets slaughtered on Hara Zetim. The blood gets sprinkled towards, right, from the mountain towards the Kodesh, but it doesn't go on the Mizbeach. All right, it's just burnt all the way out there. So it's not a sacrifice. And the pad of Yom Kippur certainly is a sacrifice, but that's special for the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol has to do everything on Yom Kippur, and this is to atone for himself. You're going to have some non-Kohen who's going to come in and do it. So both of them are a strange category, and that's why they're questionable. Now we're going to identify who says which. Itmar, shechitat para ufaro, Rav u'Shmuel, chad amar para pesula, paro keshera, v'chad amar paro pesula, para keshera. All right, now we're getting closer to some identification. At least we know who says which one. Rav and Shmuel argue, but we still don't know who says which yes and who says no. All right, we're getting closer. Now we're going to identify. Tistayem de Rav, hu de amar para pesula. Rav is the one that says para aduma is no good by a zar. How do we know that? Amar Rabbi Zera shechitat para bezar pesula. Rabbi Zera did say that explicitly, that para aduma cannot be done by a non-Kohen. Amar Rav ala el azar v'chuka sheninu ba. And Rav gave a source. He says the source is that regarding para aduma, we're going to be quoting the text a lot here. So I brought the whole text of para aduma in Bemidbar Yud Tet, with different colors, and here it says in yellow chukah, and it says El Azar. So because it says El Azar has to be the one to do it, and it says the word chukah, meaning that's the law for all time. It's not just, for example, El Azar is going to do it. It has to be done just the way this is. Not El Azar is not going to be around forever, but a Kohen like El Azar. Therefore, it has to be always done by a Kohen. So since Rav gave a proof that it has to be done by a Kohen, it makes sense that Rav is the one that said para duma is pesula bezad, and therefore the part of the Kohen Gadol would be kasher with a zad. And Shemuel says the opposite. All right, good. Now let's analyze Rav's opinion. Rav, maishena para dichtiv el azar v'chuka. Parona meha ketib aharon v'chuka. What's the difference? You said the reason is para duma says el azar has to do it, and the word chok. The part of Yom Kippur, it says Aharon has to do it, and also at the end of the chapter it says chukah. So that's the law for all time, that a Kohen would always have to do it. And in this case, particularly, we have to be the Kohen Gadol. So they're really the derivation of Pisukim is the same thing. So we say no, it's still different. Shechita lav avodahi. The slaughter of the pad on Yom Kippur is not an avodah, like in general, right? It's not. It can be done in general by a zar, which is true. So that makes sense. However, ihachi para nameh, para aduma also say the shechita is not an avodah. I mean, it's even less so. So shane para de kodshe bedek habayiti. We say no. Para aduma is a completely different category. It's not a sacrifice at all. It's kodshe bedek habayit. It's something that's consecrated for temple maintenance, and something for temple maintenance has to be dealt with by a kohen. Now this is strange, and that's going to be the next line. It should be a kavachomer, right? If you're telling me that something that is a sacrifice, this is a chatat, it's a very holy sacrifice, and it can be done by a non-kohen, then all the more so, para aduma, which is not a sacrifice, it's only bedek habayit. That's a lower level of kedusha. So for sure it should be able to be done by a non-kohen. So luckily we have an answer. Amadav shisha b'det Rav Idi, midi dehava amarot negaim delav avodahi ubaya kihuna. I'll give you another example of something that's not avodah, but that yet a kohen has to do it, and that's identifying a nega. When someone has a skin disease or something, a mold in their house, it has to be identified as sarat by a kohen, right? Doesn't matter. You can go to the best doctor in the world, the best expert. Doesn't work unless it's a kohen. So that's something that has to be done by a kohen, even though it's not a temple service. So we see examples of such a thing, and here is another example. So there could be such a thing. Paraduma, even though it's just bedek habayit on a lower level of kedusha, nevertheless has a special law, and that has to be done by a kohen. Whereas the pad of Yom Kippur is like any other sacrifice; it can be done by a zar. Good. So Rav is all explained. Now, Lishmuel damar paro pesula. He says, no, the para, it's the part of Yom Kippur. That's the one that a non-Kohen cannot do. What's his reason? Does his reason because it says regarding Yom Kippur, Aharon and Chukah, so it has to be by a Kohen for all times? Para aduma nameh haketib el azar v'chukah. So the derivations of the Pesukim are the same. Shane hatam dichtiv v'shachat otah lefanav sheyeh zar shochet ve'elazar ro'eh. This is a very interesting derivation. V'shachat here in green, right? It says they're going to take the this paraduma outside, and then v'shachat otah, someone will slaughter it lefanav, in front of him. So here's a question: who is doing the slaughtering? Well, lefanav means in front of Elazar. So it says Elazar slaughtering it in front of himself. No, it means someone is slaughtering it in front of Elazar. And so according to that, that means a non-Kohen is slaughtering it in front of Elazar. As I was watching, but it's a non-Kohen. So that's a insightful derivation.
Lefanav doesn't mean in front of the guy who's being purified?
No, because we prepare one para aduma when we get a big mountain. The people need purifying on that around. This takes a whole day. Then tomorrow we'll bring people in. Over the next years we can use the same, right? So the fanav we don't burn it for one person. Okay, so lefanav. As mechusa machane v'shrat oto lefanav. Okay, so this is a valid reading. So now Rav, what are you going to say about that? Rav shelo yasich da'ato mimena. Rav says v'shachat oto lefanav is in fact Elazar. Elazar will slaughter it in front of himself. That's a way of saying concentrate on this, right? Keep your eyes on it. Keep your face towards it. Don't think about other things, right? You have to keep your attention on it. So that Rav learns that halacha. Ushmuel shelo yasich da'ato minaleh. Shmuel must agree that you have to pay attention. Where does he derive it? He has another pasuk. Nafkaleh misaraf et hapara le'aynav. Later on, when he burns it, it says he burns it in front of his eyes. What do you mean in front of his eyes? Where is he looking? It means that he should pay attention. So Shmuel says, I use this pasuk up here, v'shachat od panat, to say that a zar can do it. Can do shechita, and this pasuk to say you have to concentrate. Okay. Right. Shmuel nafka. Good. V'Rav. Now, how about Rav? What does he do with the second pasuk that says v'saraf et hapara la'enav had b'shchita v'had b'srefa? I use both of them to teach attention. That you have to pay attention during shechita and pay attention during srefa. Okay, in case this kohen has ADD, pay attention. You got to keep telling him. And so, why do we need to say both? Why can't you just tell me in one place and I'll know for the rest of it? Usricha, I need both places according to Rav. Both pesukim. Di katab lachamana b'shchita. If it only said to concentrate during shechita, I would say that's the beginning of the service. So make sure to have concentration in the beginning. Like in the Amidah, right? You have to have concentration for the first beracha. Hopefully, when you start on a good note, then you'll continue. That's the essential. Aval sirefa emala, but sirefa is later on. Maybe he'll say, I don't need to concentrate there. So that's why siricha, I need to say the second pasuk of sirefa. I only had said the Besraf et Hapara la'aynav, that to concentrate during the burning. I might say this is the most important part of it because this is when you're really making it into para aduma. I'm burning it and making the ashes. But shechita is just a preliminary, not so important. So that's why the pasuk has to say it in both places. So I should concentrate on and during those 2 points. Now, the Gemara is going to ask further within this. So at what point does he not have to concentrate, right? If you're saying here and here he does, so there's other things in the middle. So what's less important? If you're saying it's regarding the gathering of the ashes and going to get water because you're going to mix the water with the ashes, so those are activities. Are those less important? Then you can be daydreaming when you do that. Lemishmeret lemenida. No good because it says lemishmeret. Mishmeret means you have to watch it, guard it, be careful. You have to be paying attention for that, right? And that's the pasuk there is asaf ishtot efra para v'niach mechus hamachane. That's the gathering of the ashes. So he's got to pay attention there. So that's not what it's talking about. Ela lemote hashlachat as erev be'ezob ushni tolat elav gufa de para ninhu. All right, while it's burning, you throw in, as we saw in the previous stuff, that you throw in the other 3 ingredients, the cedar, the hyssop, and the crimson, and that, since it's not talking about the body of the para aduma, it's just other ingredients that you have to throw in. Those, in fact, are less important, and you don't have to be concentrating for that point. Okay, very good. Now that we mentioned Rav and Shemuel, and we saw the reasons that how each one derives their opinion, we're going to note that there were other Amoraim that also argued on this very same point. Itamad shechitat para bezar, Rabbi Ami amar keshera, Rabbi Yitzchak nefcha amar pesula, Ula amar keshera, Bamrila pesula. So these other 3 sages, some say yes, some say no, some agree with Rav, some agree with Shemuel. So this was an ongoing machloket. Good. Mativ Rav Yehoshua bar Abba lesayua lerav. Okay, now we have a braita that is going to support Rav, that a Kohen cannot, Azar cannot do para aduma, cannot do shechita and para aduma. That's going to be, so we're looking for support. This is a relatively long baraita, and the proof is only going to come a little bit roundabout. So let's just pay attention to the baraita for in and of itself. Itself is interesting. En li ela hazaat memeha she'en kesherin be'isha kebi'ish ve'en kesherin ela bayom. Okay, so from the continuation, the 19:9, I'll show the pasuk in a second, that we learned that the sprinkling of the water cannot be done by a woman, has to be done by a man, and cannot be done except during the daytime, not at night. So that's a given. How do we know that? So here it is, V'zahat tahor. That's a zachar noun, ala tameh, bayom hashilishi ubayom hashibi'i, v'chito bayom hashibi'i. So from here we learn that has to be done by, the sprinkling has to be done by a male and during the day. All right, so everyone agrees to that. Now, minayin lerabot shechita. But what about the shechita? Does that have to be done by a man and during the day? How about kabbalat dama, accepting the blood of the paraduma, vaza'atama, and then we sprinkle it, towards the kodesh, usrefata, and the burning of the cow, v'ashlachat esev ezobdushi talat, and throwing the other ingredients in, tamud omar Torah. So way up in the beginning, it says the word Torah. And so how do I know that I apply the law that I know is down here? How do I know I apply it also to the items mentioned up here? Because the word Torah says it's going to be a standard for all of these things, has to be done by a man and during the day. Now, question. Now, what about gathering the ashes and getting the water? Was that also included in the exclusion? Is that also has to be done by a man and during the day? Zot is exclusive. So Zot says these are exceptions to the rule, which would mean that gathering the ashes and the water can be done by a man, by a woman, and at night. Okay, there's a mistake in this edition. They repeated this phrase twice. All right. Now, question: how do you decide which one to include and which one to exclude? I know you have two words. HaTorah is an inclusive word. Zot is an exclusive word. But it seems kind of arbitrary. You just decided which steps you have to be done and which don't have to be done in the day and by a man. So אחר שריבה כתוב ומיעט אמרת, הרי אנו למדים כולן מהזעת מימיה. מה הזעת מימיה אינן קשרים באישה כבאיש ואין קשרים אלא ביום, אף אני אביא שחיטתה וקבלת דמה, והזעת דמה ושרפתה והשלכת ארז ואזוב ושני תולעת. So once I shirba katub umi'at. So it included and then it excluded. So I say, just like we learn all of these things from the last line, haza'at memeha, and just like that has to be with not a man and during the day. So too, I include all these other things. No, nothing new here. Ho'il ve'en kesherin be'isha kebi'ish. And kesherin ela bayom. So why am I including those? This is the reason, because I can see from those pesukim themselves at the beginning, they have to be done by a man, right? Because it says here that this is talking about El Azar. He's the one that's going to be doing all these things here. V'lakach El Azar, right? And he's doing the burning. So since it says El Azar and he's a man, and the Haza'ah later is a man, so it makes sense that anything that has to be done by a man also has to be done during the day. Even though the first services doesn't say day or night, though that makes sense to include those. So we're putting that together. If it's done by anything else done by a man, also is going to be during the day. And the exclusive word vizot, I'm going to apply that to gathering the ashes and getting the water, because since a woman can do that, so it makes sense to say that it can also be done at night. So that's why we decide this way and that way. And now we know which ones are which. That's the end of the Braita. Okay, why did we bring this Braita to begin with? We're bringing a proof. We're looking for a proof for Rav that Kohen and Zar cannot do the Shechita. So now, what was the question? What's your question from here? If your proof is that, since a woman cannot do the shechita, so then we can derive also that a non-Kohen cannot do the shechita. But that's not true. The sprinkling of the blood will prove it, because a woman cannot do it, but a non-Kohen can do that. So there are things that a man who's a zar can do that a woman can't do. So maybe the shechita also can be done has to be done by a man, by a man, but who said it has to be by a kohen. So we don't know anything from here. Right, just because it's pisula beish doesn't mean necessarily that's pisula bezar. So what was your question? Everybody's going to explain it. This is what the question was. Isha mai ta'ama el azar velo isha. Zar name el azar velo zar. That's a nice play on words, el azar and not zar. Right, so the point is that had we know to compare shechita to haza'ah in the first place, because just like Haza'ah said, that has to be a man and during the day, and the shechita has to be by El Azar, and then we connected, El Azar, he's a man, and therefore it has to be a man, right? And so we said, so we learned that from El Azar. Therefore, you see, El Azar is particular. El Azar is the guy who's doing the shechita, right? This proves that, right? Shachat ota lifanav. That's El Azar is doing it, and he's a kohen, and therefore has to be done by a kohen. Okay, so really, it's more of an elaboration on the proof that I've already brought, saying that you see that in this baraita we're reading v'shachat ota lifanav as someone will do shechita in front of El Azar, right? And so since you're reading it, the opposite. That's what Shemuel said. Right, good. Since we're reading it, v'shachat ota lefanav is El Azar is doing the shechita, and that's how we learned it, because he's a man. See, he's doing shechita. So once you're learning it that way, so who is that man? El Azar, he's a kohen. Then you have to know that this agrees with Rav's derivation that it's Kohen that has to do it, not a Zar. Excellent. So that is the longer version of a proof for Rav. Now we are going to just begin Ula's statement. It's a very long statement. What Ula does is he goes through all the Pesukim here and analyzes them very, very carefully. So it's a very interesting, it's like a running commentary on the whole thing. And here's his point why this is so complicated. He says, Kola parasha kula, amarula, kol parasha kula, mashma motzi miyad mashma, umashma mimela. Sometimes mashma, something that's implied in the second verse, undoes what's implied in the first verse. In other words, you have, this is going to be done by, let's say, a man, and then the next verse says something else, or Kohen, and the next verse says something else, and so not this. And sometimes it starts off in saying this will be done by a Kohen, and you continue assuming the same thing. So you have to look very carefully, when do we continue the same variables as before, and when does a variable change? So we'll see just a first couple of examples of his methodology. Untatem ota el azar hakohen. That's way in the beginning, right? Untatem, you take para aduma and you give it to el azar hakohen. So that's clear enough. Now it says you're going to give it to Elazar. Elazar is not going to live forever. So in the future, who are you going to give it to? Well, so it should be a Kohen, but what kind of Kohen? There's two interpretations of this. Some say in the future it'll be Kohen Gadol. Some say in the future it'll be Kohen Ejot. What's the ambiguity? Well, Elazar himself was a deputy Kohen Gadol. Aaron was alive. Aaron was the Kohen Gadol. So now what are we going to do with this? It has to be Kohen Gadol or can be Kohen Ejot. Okay, so that's a machloket. The one who says it could be any Kohen, fine. Elazar is, the highest ranking non-Kohen Gadol now, so any Kohen can do it in the future. But what would be your source to say it has to be Kohen Gadol? So since it says chukah, both in Paraduma, right, zot chukata Torah, and it says it regarding Yom Kippur at the end over there, so it says in both, and chukah means the Kohen Gadol has to do everything in Yom Kippur, so too, Paraduma has to be Kohen Gadol. Okay, so that's not yet really an example of Ula's something coming after the next. Here we'll see it. Vehosi ota, shelo yosi acheret, Kemota. Actually, this doesn't relate to the previous derivation either. Okay, but here he says veotzi ota. Let's see where it is in the Pesukim. He's gonna take. So they're in the Bet HaMikdash and they have this paraduma. They give it to Elazar Kohen, and Elazar is going to remove it from the Machaneh and take it to Harazetim. So Ota is singular, meaning only that. He can't take any other animals with him. So why not? Shelo yosi acheret ima kiditnan. We have a Mishnah that teaches this. Lo ita parado salaset el mosinima shechora. Let's say the paraduma is stubborn. He doesn't want to go. He likes it there. He likes the marble floors. He doesn't want to go. So you might think, I'll bring another para, a black one. It's his friend, right? If I bring the black one, he'll find, my friend's going there. I'll go there too. No, can't do that. Because people will see, look, they're taking a black one to the Harazetim, and then it gets out of sight. They're going to assume that they did shechita on the black cow. No good. And you can't bring another red cow. They say, they did two today. And that's no good either. So the B argues with the Tanakama, whoever the Tanakama is, we'll see. The B says, it's not because of the reasons you're giving. You're making up reasoning. No, it's just Gezerat HaKatuv. The Pasuk says, Ota, just bring that. Don't bring anything else. Okay. Now, V'Tanakama haketib Ota. This is a good question to be said, right? It says Ota. Why not just say the Pasuk says so? Why are you telling me all these explanations? Man Tanakama, Rabbi Shimon he dedaresh ta'ama dikra. We can identify Tanakama as Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, this occurs a few times in Shas. His general opinion is that you can derive reasons for mitzvot, and you can, and it makes a difference in how you will apply it. So I know that I'm relying. He says I'm relying on the word Ota. Now I'm just explaining what Ota means and the reason why. And theoretically, there might be a case where one would apply to one and not the other. So, and that's what we ask, my benai, who? What's the difference between them? Between these two, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi, Ika benaihu de'apek hamor bahadeh. How about bringing a donkey out, right? Let's say he doesn't want to go, and a donkey, oh, it's his friend, his donkey. He'll follow the donkey. So according to Rabbi Shimon, that's okay because the people looking, no one's going to think that they slaughtered a donkey for parah aduma. They're going to say, okay, it's just something else. But according to the B, it says bring it, just don't bring anything else. That's all. And there's nothing else to talk about. Okay, so that's, we see the beginning of Ola's derivation, and in the next stuff, we will see further explanations of how he explains each of the words in this perek. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen.